All right, y'all, I'm going to get started here. I prefer not talking in microphones, but since we're live streamed, I'm going to need to talk into this so that I guess the whole world and us as a community can listen. So I want to introduce myself. My name is John O'Malley, and I am an assistant professor at Johnson & Wales University down in Denver, Colorado. I'm also a PhD student here at the University of Wyoming in the Counseling, Education, and Supervision program. I also am a site director over the summers for Johns Hopkins University's Center for Talented Youth. They are the premier organization for gifted and talented education. I'm a nationally certified counselor. I'm a licensed professional counselor. And as you hear me list off my accomplishments, you can just realize that, ever since I was young, I was always destined for greatness. You can see that picture, and you can just tell that I was destined for greatness, okay? But that wasn't always the case, because in first grade, I was actually diagnosed with a learning disability. And that's kind of a crucial time, because that's when we start getting tracked. And in the first grade, kind of starting in kindergarten, my teacher started to recognize that, whoa, John's not learning the way the rest of the other students are learning, which kind of brought some concern. So the school district at that time was kind of like, he'll be fine, he's just a little bit slower, push him along. And my parents were like, wait a second, this isn't going right. So my family actually does the travel for Loyola University and DePaul University. So my dad got on the phone with them, started making calls, and I got evaluated at Loyola University in Chicago. That's where I'm from. And in the first grade, I got diagnosed with a learning disability. Well, ever since I got diagnosed with a learning disability, my educational career path kind of changed. It wasn't the same as my neighbors. So I grew up in an affluent neighborhood. So when everybody else was looking at, when everyone else was looking at gifted education and honors programs and things like that, I think my parents were looking at how do we at least get John in the mainstream classes, right? So it's interesting because you see me now and you see me as an assistant professor and close to getting a PhD and all that stuff, but it wasn't always kind of started like that. So if you listen to kind of my narrative in the first grade, what you're going to go ahead and the first thing you're going to go ahead and notice is I got pulled out of the class for tutoring, intensive tutoring, okay? But the thing that you don't necessarily always realize about students with learning disabilities is we get freaked out by that because at that age, we just want to be just like everybody else. So we're always getting asked questions about why you're getting pulled out of the classroom and things like that. So we learn how to be sneaky, right? So I would say first to third grade was, I got some intense help and it was great, but I was starting to become shy and really embarrassed about myself because I just want to be like everybody else and I'm getting pulled out here and things like that. So I think the next kind of big moment I can remember was in the fifth grade because my teacher at that time kind of gave me the message that I just wasn't trying hard enough, that I was lazy. If I could just work harder, I can go ahead and be like everybody else, which just kind of sent me more into that kind of, cycle of shame, right? But I got super lucky when I got to the sixth grade because I had Miss Lily, I had Miss Morris, I had Miss Hernandez. And you want to talk about some teachers who don't put up with anything. They both challenged and supported me and kind of paved out a path so they would push me really hard, but anytime someone would mess with me, right, they would definitely stand up for me. Then I got into high school, right, and I'm sure all of you can remember, maybe you're in high school, it can be kind of brutal, right? That's where you're trying to figure out really who you are. And that's when I forgot it, I wish I brought it, that's when I became really connected to music, and I became a trumpet player, and so they ended up featuring me at one of the biggest conferences or competitions in Illinois, and I was recognized as one of the best musicians in the state of Illinois, right? So pretty cool if you can kind of hear my narrative. So at this point, I kind of told you a little bit of a story about me, right? And when I tell folks my story, I think folks put two meanings on it. They can go one of either way. I think one interpretation someone can go ahead and put to my story is, whoa, look at that guy, he's overcame all these things. But to be completely transparent with you, I don't think that's the right meaning. I think the right meaning is, look at all those people that invested in them. Look at all those resources that guy got, okay? And what my life's work is now taking on is the way that people invested in me, that's not happening in the rest of the educational system. See, because of my privilege, because I was born in more of an affluential family, I got hooked up. And I'm here because of that. And if you look at the statistics, and I'll show you here in a little bit, not everyone is afforded the opportunities I got afforded. And why learning disabilities, I think, are one of the social justice issues of our time is because my path could have been a completely different one. And I don't necessarily know if it was completely willpower. It was the investment of other people and my social kind of class that I came from. Here's another example. In undergrad, anyone in undergrad right now? Awesome. I failed music history. Music history. I failed music history 3 times. 3 times in a row. If you fail it 3 times in a row, you get booted, right? Well, I think being from Chicago, we don't like to take no for an answer. You know, my family got involved and they advocated for me and we got that changed, right? Here's the problem. Do you notice that I had an army behind me my whole life advocating for me? When I kind of talk to other young kiddos with learning disabilities, they don't always have the army of support behind them. What ends up happening is they get tracked into different ways and they go a different direction. So I hope the takeaway that you kind of hear from me is not that I overcame all this stuff, but that there were resources available to me that helped me get to where I was. And sadly, those aren't available to other folks. So I really connect to this quote. It's by Jonathan Moody and David Cole. They wrote Learning Outside the Lines. It's kind of become a book that students with learning disabilities, specifically at the college level, read. I'll just read it to you. It says, "The day we are diagnosed as disabled is one of those memories that burns too bright ever to go away. It sits at the core of our identity, bridging our consciousness and our subconscious, holding the key to our development, and it flickers like a buzz of white fluorescent light bulb." That connects to me because a lot of times folks say, oh, you overcame this. And it's like, what are you talking about? I overcame this. This is something I deal with every single day. If you want to go ahead and watch me write a paper, every 3rd line is a squiggly thing. I'm flipping things all the time. There's nothing that I've overcome. It's something that I've, in a sense, learned to live with. So it kind of brings me back to why you're here, right? So you've listened to my narrative, and hopefully the takeaway is that guy, had an army of support behind him. And what the takeaway I think hopefully is that we need to make sure that every, student that has a learning disability has the support that I got. Because here's why. Because the lack of attention around emotional well-being for people with LD is actually kind of what our literature is showing, why 50% of incarcerated youth actually could qualify for a learning disability. It's kind of insane that it's that stark, and why we need to start investing with students with learning disabilities. When we go ahead and look at the literature around, okay, what are we going to go ahead and do to support this? What we notice is that we keep on investing in the academic side, trying to get them caught up, which is super important, but we're not necessarily investing in the personal social side of it. And that's where the sense of self comes in, and that's where folks can build the resilience to kind of, start to live with having a learning disability. So what is a learning disability? So a learning disability, I'm going to give you the most simple definition, is really the gap between academic potential and intellectual ability. There's a gap. So what does that mean? What that means is they are capable of achieving this, but we're just not seeing it in the normal, or not normal, but we're not seeing it in the way that education is being delivered to them there, right? So there's this gap. So to be diagnosed with a learning disability in the States, now that's not everywhere in the world because they have some different things, you actually need to score in the normal IQ range, okay? And what we're finding is that managing the stigma of having a learning disability is a lifespan issue. It's not something that just goes away after you're done with K through 12. It's something that you need to go ahead and manage the rest of your life, right? So currently I work at Johnson & Wales. I sometimes work with students with learning disabilities. And what ends up happening is they say, okay, great, I'm here, I'm done, I've made it to the promised land, this is awesome, I don't need to engage in the support anymore. And they kind of learn really fast that the support that they engaged in K through 12 is not only the support they'll need to engage in college, but for the rest of their lives, right? So I use Dragon. I can talk to it and it will type for me. It's pretty cool. I show it to my students and they think I'm super cool because I'm using this computer program that just, I speak to it and it types. And those are the type of tools where, you know, if students are using that K through 12, most likely they need to start using that in college and use it when they go out into industry, in their career. So as you can see, we need to start helping students recognize the lifespan issues with having a learning disability. It's not necessarily something that one can just overcome. It's something that one must manage and learn to live with. So let's talk about what sense of self is. I really like Jones's definition of this because they define sense of self about the beliefs one has about themselves, the meaning they put to past events, and how they might imagine their future, right? So as you can imagine, thinking about that definition, you can see how having a learning disability can absolutely influence one's sense of self. So think about it, the beliefs you're attaching to yourself. Let's go back to high school, right? I remember in high school there was a special education wing. I would make conscious choices to get in trouble to be late to class because I didn't want anyone else to see me going into that wing, right? So what was the belief I was attaching to myself? Well, at that point, the belief I was attaching with is if I have this, you know, I don't know. I think at that time I was like, you know, I'm not like everyone else. I'm stupid. I just want to fit in, right? So you can go ahead and see how that influenced the belief you attach to yourself. And again, K through 12, what you can notice is that they were investing in me to bridge the academic gap, but there was kind of holes in helping me in the personal social area, developing the positive sense of self. And the meaning of past events, right? So it's taken me some time actually to get to the point where I am today. So the takeaway is, you know, I didn't necessarily overcome these things. I had this massive support system behind me that helped, right? But, you know, it didn't take much to trigger me into a shame cycle. And that's because of the kind of unstable sense of self I've had for a while. So helping students develop that positive sense of self so when they're triggered or they're struggling and things like that, they can better manage the meaning they put to those things. And how they imagine kind of their future. So with folks that have a learning disability K through 12, they will, I know for myself, I had an IEP meeting every year. IEP stands for Individual Education Plan. And that's where folks start to talk about, you know, I would say K through 5, they're talking about, okay, what are we going to go ahead and do to prepare them for high school? Now, once they get into high school, they're starting to talk about, okay, how can we prepare this kiddo for a career or what's next after this, right? And I can tell you that the messages are pretty clear around that table, and they are different, right? So you have folks that are at that table that are giving messages that, you know what, I absolutely think that they can handle a 4-year college. And I remember receiving messages and getting a packet. My mom kept it. I still have a packet of like, you know what, I think trade schools would be best for John. And you know what, I think everyone's intention around that table is great. But I think sometimes we go ahead and forget and limit the possibility of folks because of our preconceived notions of what it means to have a learning disability. And those messages come, all the time to people. So being mindful of that around the sense of self, of how one can imagine their future, is the messages that everyone's receiving. So again, the message is helping folks be mindful of that sense of self so they can make intentional kind of decisions around the beliefs they're attaching to themselves, the meaning of their past experiences, and imagining their own future. So here are some of the facts around having a learning disability. So about 11% of college students have a disability, which is a broad sense. And out of that 11%, about 5% are students with learning disabilities. So 5% of college campuses, you're going to go ahead and have students with learning disabilities. So 67% of young adults within 8 years of graduating from high school do attend some post-secondary education. So I think that's huge because they're not saying they go to college, but they attend some post-secondary education, which are things like trade schools or culinary school, or maybe they go into the military. We're considering that now post-secondary. Now what we go ahead and see is for the students that go to the 4-year schools, they actually graduate 37%. There's a retention rate or graduation rate of 37% with students with disabilities, almost half of the general population. And if we go ahead and look at that, part of it is because the students that get to college, because of kind of that weaker sense of self that they have, are like, okay, I made it. I can do this. I want to do it on my own. And because they haven't worked through that sense of self piece, they don't engage in the support services necessarily to always be successful. So what we find in our data is K through 12, for students that were diagnosed with learning disabilities and then they come to college, only 25% of them actually register with the college's learn disability support center. It's called something different on every campus, but only 25% register with them. And 24% of young adults who are diagnosed with LD do not believe they have a learning disability after high school, okay? Now let me be clear. It's not my intention to chain you to this label, okay? It's not my intention to say this is what you have, so deal with it. But what our research shows is that this is a lifespan issue. And the faster we can go ahead and recognize that, the faster we can start engaging in the support services that we need to be successful, no matter what career you go into. I'll share a quick story because, I don't know, maybe I'm overstating it, but I think I have a positive sense of self. And just last week, I took my comprehensive exams and I passed. Pretty awesome. Give me a round of applause. Thank you. Yeah. I passed. And the intention was good. So the intention was good, but I sent a message. I got a message that said, you know what? We think that's really great that you didn't engage in accommodations. It really shows that you want to be graded just like everybody else. That was just last week with folks that have PhDs, okay? I started reflecting about that, and I got really pissed off because I got pissed off at them, I got pissed off myself, because the truth is I really should have engaged in those accommodations. I spent 20 hours a day writing those damn comprehensive exams. I almost near killed myself doing this thing, and I didn't engage in the accommodations or the support services because I was afraid of what people were going to go ahead and think of me, right? And it's kind of sad because here I am trying to help other kiddos do this, and the parallel process is at play. I'm not doing it myself. So what does that say? That I'm not doing it, and I expect them to, and I'm like, man, I got to check myself, and I need to go ahead and better, advocate for this field so that folks can engage in this, right? And we need to go ahead and start checking people in education, because I'm not asking for anything extra. What I'm asking for is access into an education that can go ahead and normalize it so I can play on the same field as just everybody else, right? So there's a lot of biases still out there in what it means to engage in accommodations, engage in support services, and as you can see with me, I'm still in the parallel process where it's still hard to do so because of the meaning you put in engaging in those type of things. So I'm going to go ahead and end with this. She was in the back, but my colleague Christina Feynman, she's a big Brene Brown fan. Brene Brown put this in her book, and I love this quote. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I'm going to kind of pick out some of the main parts. It says, it's not the critic who counts, it's the person that's in the arena. That's the person who dares greatly, right? And that's kind of where I'm getting meaning in my life now, right? How can I continue to be in education and higher education and be in the arena while I manage the lifespan issues that come with having a learning disability? And what my life's work will be, and I hope the message that you take away is not that I overcame all these things, but that I had this amazing support network behind me, and that we need to go ahead and improve and make sure that amazing support network is behind every kid, K through 12, so they have the opportunity to stand on the stage one day too. And I hope that's the takeaway you take from here today. Thank you so much.